Hey everyone, this episode is about the mind-body connection and the wisdom that our bodies have. In this episode, I talked to Deanna Moffitt. She's an executive and wellness coach and the author of The Rewrite, Change Your Life One Story at a Time. She specializes in enhancing leadership wellness through somatic practices, including breathwork and Qigong. And Deanna and I talked about how we can often overlook and even disregard our body's signals and messages. She calls it the whisper before the scream, and why it's so critical for hyper-focused, high-performing leaders and professionals to find ways to slow down and tune into our body's messages, lest we deal with all of the ramifications like burnout, fatigue, and even worse, chronic or life-threatening illnesses. She shares her experience in training in Qigong and breathwork and how to take even small steps to help our bodies process stress, emotion, and the day-to-day experiences of life and work. So let's get into it with Deanna. Hi, Deanna.
Hi, Zovig. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you here because today we're going to be talking about something that I'm noticing is showing up more sort of in the realm of the workplace, which is the mind-body connection. And somatic awareness, if you want to call it that, but just starting to become more aware of the messages that our body is sending us during the day when we are anywhere, but in this context for this show, at work, and what that experience is like. You are a coach, you are a trainer, you are a leader, you are a facilitator, you are a speaker, you're with people all the time.
Yeah.
And I know that you have in the last year or two sort of made this expedition into breathwork, which is a huge component of mind-body connection. And so that's why I wanted to have you on to talk a little bit about that experience and how you're seeing it show up at work and just in life. So I want to start by asking you, when you think about understanding the body and who we are in this world in the year of 2025 and at work and as leaders, how does understanding and connecting with our physical body show up? What does it look like? What does it mean for people right now? What are you seeing?
Well, I'm going to take us back. So a couple years ago, I wrote a book called The Rewrite, all about the stories we tell ourselves. And as I was writing it, I really recognized that we can't completely change these stories unless we're unlocking the stories that are in our bodies as well. You know, we think we can kind of just do the top-down work. And what I recognize is that's a long way to get there, because that's got to seep through the brain and then somehow get down into the body, this work. But honestly, if we start with the body first or in tandem, we have a much better opportunity to kind of change the narrative, change the story, or at least become aware of it. And it started with Qigong first. I really got interested in Qigong and studied that to become a facilitator with it, and then went into breathwork. And what I realized in the workplace is that people are detached from their bodies. And I know that sounds funny, right? You're not a head just walking around, but honestly, for some of us, we really are we're just walking in all over the place with just our heads so detached from our body's experience, which means we're detached from our emotional state. We're detached from our intuition. And there are more signals that are coming up from our gut to our brain that go from our brain to our gut. And I think that is just fascinating, and how being detached from this wholeness of our humanness, you know, puts a reliance on our brain, and it can do the work for sure, but it is missing out on so many signals from our body to tell us when things aren't right, when, you know, leaders have to make decisions all the time. And if we're just, there's this emphasis on facts and figures and data, which I think are really important. But there's also the other side of it. The body is sending us signals all the time. In fact, you know, stress is a huge indicator for us, right? And stress is a big thing that we're seeing in the workplace. And the research that I'm looking at is telling me that the higher stress you have and the longer you're in those stress state, the more likely you are going to get a long-term non-communicative disease, which things like cancer, which things like heart disease, Parkinson's, can all have a feedback to levels of stress. Not to say that's the only thing, but when you think of the workplace and what is being asked of our workforce, and I think especially our leaders, I think our leaders are in the toughest spot of all. And I'm not talking about the C-suite, the executives. I'm talking about the people who are leading out once those decisions are made. I think that's just one of the toughest positions of all in a workplace. And that stress level that they're under is not leading to our best decisions for sure, but it's also leading to, I think, to long-term damage to our health.
Yeah. Okay. So why do you think we can get so detached from our physical bodies? Like you said, the emotion, the intuition, the messaging. Where do you think that detachment starts?
Oh, honestly, I think it starts in school. I mean, that early, you know, we've got to ask for a hall pass to go to the bathroom. We've got to ask, permission to go do things. And someone else is telling us when it's okay to actually even act for, for our body. So we start turning off the signals and waiting for other people to tell us when things are okay and to do okay. Put your hand down. Curiosity is kind of pushed aside because I need to teach you what's on this list. I need you to know these things. And it is trained out of us at a really young age, and it just continues on, certainly into the workplace when we are asked to work beyond sometimes our desires, sometimes our abilities. And we want to do a good job. We're the kind of workforce that's in there where, of course, we're going to say yes. But the more we're saying yes to other people means we're saying kind of no to ourselves, and our bodies start sending us a signal, right? How many of us have the gut aches, the body aches? I know when I'm super stressed, my hips completely lock up, and it almost makes it challenging to walk well. But people are walking around and dismissing signs from their body. Their body is always talking to them all the time that, hey, something needs to be looked at here.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I think you are right. It starts very early, to disregard. That's how I think of it. Just disregard what the body is saying. And it's not surprising. And I've talked about this before. We're measured and evaluated constantly for our output, for tangible things outside of us. We are not measured and rewarded and encouraged for things like how we think, our intuition, our emotional intelligence. We say we need leaders who are emotionally intelligent. Oh, but also we're not going to hire you unless you are a high producer, unless you're just churning out the work constantly. And so there's a constant output, but very little connection inward and input and replenishing through by giving back to ourselves. I wasn't sure if I was going to share this, but because you mentioned stress and the connection to physical illness and long-term illnesses that may occur because of that sort of disregarding of the body. I mean, that's something that I experienced in 2017. I lived in New York City and I suddenly developed Graves' disease and hyperthyroidism, which is an overactive thyroid. And it had gotten to the point where it was at a very dangerous level. And so by the time I went to the doctor to see what the heck was going on with me, it was off the charts. Not in it, like it was like raining in wild horses. And I had for months, my eyes were bulging out of my face. So you could visibly see something was not right. I was so inflamed in some of my joints that there were days I couldn't walk because I was visibly swollen in my knees and my ankles and my shoulders. There were days I couldn't put my clothes on. My heart would race. I was sweating constantly. I was at war with people in my office that had space heaters because I thought that they were overheating me, but really it was my body overheating from the inside. And I would get these full body tremors during the day. It would just like take over head to toe. I would just start to shake from the inside for several minutes at a time. And I disregarded that for months, thinking I just have some anxiety. I would be working out, I'd be in yoga, I'd be at the gym, and I'd be feeling those full body tremors. And I'm like, wow, I'm real out of shape. What's going on with me? Like thinking that it was something I had to do in order to fix what was happening. I was completely misunderstanding. I went from disregarding to misunderstanding and blaming myself for the physical experience I was having, and didn't even know how to listen to it until someone looked at me in the face, a friend, and she was like, what the hell is going on with your eyes? You need to go to a doctor. So it can get that bad.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, absolutely. And I'm so sorry that you went through that, Zovig, and how detached you were
Yeah.
to look in the mirror on a daily basis. And, this is what we do. Under those stressful conditions, we squash it down, nothing's wrong, nothing's wrong. And so your body sends out bigger and bigger signals,
Yes,
start
screaming.
small. It's screaming at us, right? Constantly to say something needs to be looked at.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. Unfortunately, our traditional Western medicine isn't always capable of giving us the time and the energy to investigate, to figure out. And honestly, sometimes they don't even ask the right questions. My mom was diagnosed with cancer this last year, and she went to a great hospital. It's a teaching hospital. They served her really well, but I was shocked that no one ever asked her, "What are your stress levels? Tell me about your lifestyle. What is going on?" It's just as if cancer appears out of, you know, no, cancer is a sign from your body that, hey, something might be off. And I think sometimes that can be frustrating or hard for people to hear when, children or people, little kids, like they don't have stress levels, but who knows generationally, we're finding more and more that stress and those hormones are passed down generationally, so that it could have been 3 generations ago, 2 generations ago, and it's been put into our body's responses to be, anxiety filled and stressed. And our world is just not set up in a traditional way to help us heal. And our bodies naturally want to heal.
Yeah. And our bodies have an amazing capacity to heal themselves, right? Like to right itself, to recalibrate itself. It's really amazing if you start to allow your body to do what it needs to do. It knows what it needs to do, which is miraculous. But
Yeah.
I feel like I was fighting with my body at the time, like it wasn't doing what I thought it was supposed to do, and really it was a cry for help.
Mm-hmm.
I like that you said we don't, in Western medicine, and this is not knocking Western medicine, because Western medicine has served me many times, right?
Yeah.
But I think it is not the only way. It is a piece of the healing process. It is a piece. But you talked about the time to investigate. And when you said the word time, I immediately thought, no one thinks they have time. We have no time at work. I'm in a constant scarcity for time. Deadlines. I have to do it now before it disappears. I have to get this done. I'm on billable hours. I'm on, my boss is waiting, the client's waiting, blah, blah, blah. Never enough time. And I wonder if you can share a little bit about what you've seen of that sort of belief that we hold, that there's never enough time at work, and how you've seen that affect the people that you've worked with, the clients, the groups, how that's shown up, or maybe even for yourself, if you've experienced that.
No, I think you're so right, Zovig. And, with the groups I'm working with, oftentimes that's the first thing that they come up with when it comes to changing something or doing something different. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. And I don't think it's ever an issue of time. I think it's an issue of priority. And what happens when I always say that if you aren't really clear on your values, not only your values as a leader, but your values as a human, you will be living your company's values. And your company's values are always generally do more with less, right? So we get on this gerbil wheel of, if I'm not really clear on what's important to me, and I think your health should be really important to you, I'm going to get on that gerbil wheel and run as fast as I can because I'm going to live my company's values. for me. And yes, there's always those big vision statements, and this is who we are. But especially our public companies, their primary goal is to make money with less. And though that's never going to be on the wall as you walk in, you can feel it for a lot of leaders as they're living their life. So when I thinking about time, it is really an adjustment of thinking, oh, hold on a second here. It's not about time. It's about my priorities. And what is truly my priority? My priority, not my company's priority, not even my team's priority. And I hope that you're within your value system as a leader, that those would be part of it. But even in that, are you prioritizing which of your values feels most important to you? Because I think people can get into a service trap, especially women leaders who can serve everybody else until their body, which has been screaming at them, says, I can't, listen, we're going to make it really big now. We're going to give you cancer, or we're going to give you something that will make you have to stop. Right. And I don't want to say that for people to say, cancer can come up for a lot of different reasons. But I think stress in our world is one of the bigger ones, how our bodies begin talking to us. And again, if we can hear the whisper and start tending to the whispers, we never have to hear the screams.
Oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That is such a haunting way.
Yeah, right?
to put that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about the whispers
Mm-hmm.
that can become screams, because no, not every experience with stress leads to some life-threatening disease, right? But I want to talk a little bit about what some of those signals are, because even the smartest, most intelligent of people sometimes don't recognize the whispers. They don't realize that that's what's happening. And so I want to name them so that people can hear them. And maybe reflect if they have experienced or are experiencing some of those things. So you mentioned your hips lock up when you're in stress, right? So it affects your mobility. I have noticed that for me, I get two primary things. One is that when I'm in stress, particularly if I fear that I have made a mistake or something is going to go wrong, my heart starts to race. I get a really fast beating heart. In fact, when I first started in my early years of facilitation and I would get in front of groups, I didn't feel consciously nervous or anxious, but my body was. And so I would get a racing heart for the whole session, 2, 3, 4, sometimes 5-hour sessions. And by the time I was done, I would leave with pressure headaches because my heart had been on overdrive for so long. And so that was like a physiological subconscious experience for me that I did not recognize, because I didn't emotionally feel scared. I loved being in front of people, but my body had some sort of response to it. So heart racing, and I know for me, my mouth can get dry. And in the rarest of circumstances, if I am feeling threatened, and I mean like emotionally threatened or so deeply offended by something that offends my morality, let's say, like, these big philosophical topics, and it's only happened a handful of times in my life, my throat will start to close up. And those are signs for me. Now I realize they're signs, but back then I was like, I didn't understand why I couldn't breathe or why I would get tension headaches, why my heart was racing. So I wonder if you could just name some other maybe physiological signs that people might start to notice that you've experienced or you've seen or heard of others experiencing.
Sure. And, everybody is different. That when you were talking about your heart racing, I was reminded of this idea that, that's cortisol just shooting through your body constantly. And what can happen is people can get, quote unquote, addicted to their hormones, right? So if I get used to having cortisol through my body, the idea of going into my parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest, the ease and relax, feels wildly uncomfortable because I'm never there. So I got to keep doing and creating so that I actually feel that cortisol, which it's crazy, but it can become people's comfort zone. And so when they try and sit and meditate, they're like, I can't do it. I can't sit still.
Yeah.
Right. I can't, that feels wildly uncomfortable to me. And just that recognition of we can't be in our bodies and be in rest. We can't just be present without the need to be doing or activating, or that can be a signal, right? Certainly the gut upsets can be a signal. You're tired. A simple act of being tired. When you're overwhelmed, it's your body trying to tell you, I need rest. And there are a few companies that I've gone into where there are restrooms, and I mean nap rooms, not bathrooms, but that there's a place for, especially, here's what we have to recognize is that when we are really head driven, and I'm talking about we're living our life through all of the work that our brain can do without detaching, that work is so glucose dependent. It is burning way more calories than we recognize, which is why, if you can think about the last time you started a new job and you weren't doing anything physical, but you came home and you were exhausted. It was because you were being asked to be present throughout most of the day. And that is exhausting for us. And so when you think of being a leader and being asked to sit in meeting after meeting after meeting, and your energy just gets drained out of your body, right? You have to do something. And this is where Qigong and even breathwork can be really helpful, is to create more energy back, because it is regenerative. You can regenerate energy. But man, when you're asked, and I know many of your listeners who are leaders are doing this all the time. They go from 8 a.m. meeting to 9 to 10, 11. They get maybe a half hour break, but it's a meeting for lunch, and that is just completely exhausting without taking a little 5-minute break, a little 10-minute break. Go touch grass, get outside, do something that reconnects you with your body, because all of that energy that your brain is using is draining you completely. I know many of your listeners that drive home or that commute home, or even just turning off your computer at home, the first thing you want to do is go hit the couch and just chill out. So, your body's telling you you're tired, or you're feeling muscle tension. Muscle tension is energy locked up somewhere. So I can often feel it in my trapezius muscles up here as well as my hips, right? So I get that holding on. And just think about this. When we are holding on to something, imagine holding on or gripping a ball or gripping something for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and how much energy that would be. You would be exhausted from holding on to that. But that's what we're doing in our body. Right? We have way more power to show up with when we are in a relaxed state in our body, as opposed to holding on and clenching something. And that you can look around a room and just see people, especially toward the end of the day, their shoulders start creeping up higher and higher, right? They're just holding on to tension. And imagine that you're walking around, how much energy it takes to just even hold up your muscles like this, instead of just being in a relaxed state.
Yeah. Yeah, I can absolutely relate to the tension and the holding of the neck muscles, the traps. I mean, I get frequent tension headaches that I really have to work through, and I have started to notice the beginning tiny signs of those tension headaches. I get a tiny pinprick in my trap muscles. It feels like someone's poking me with a little needle. And that's my sign to stand up from my desk. And, I practice yoga, so I'll just bend over, forward fold, and touch my toes and just hang there for a little while, just sort of decompress, like something to just shift the physical energy of having been sitting in my chair and typing or reading, or I lean into my screen as, when I get really intense about something. And like, even just those movements, I love how you described just holding a ball for 8, 9, 10 hours. Like that is what we're doing. Everything's gripped. Our emotions, our muscles, our brains, everything is gripped. And we can't sustain that over long periods of time. We really can't.
Yeah. And that, the idea of gripping on to our emotions, I feel like people don't even grip onto it. They just try and ignore them.
Ah,
right.
okay.
So they're just like, packing
Yeah.
those
And that
emotions
takes
down.
energy too.
Right? Totally. And becomes blockage. It becomes blockage in our system. There's idea behind Qigong is that Qi, the life force energy, should be flowing through us freely in all throughout our bodies. And when we have a blockage of energy or resistance somewhere, then it can't flow, right? And so releasing that, and I can just give your viewers, your listeners, just one really easy thing to do.
Please.
Yeah.
Please
So
do.
I would usually do this standing up, but think about when you see animals and if you have a dog out in the wild, when they have a moment where like they get scared and they bark, right? You have two dogs, I know, and they bark or they get aggressive for some reason. Shortly after, what you'll see is they'll just shake. And what they're doing is they're shaking their energy. Animals are so smart. They don't want to hold on to that energy. What do? We just grip our pencils harder, and we just hold it onto. So it's just a simple shake. And you can stand up. I'm not going to stand up right here, but just stand up and just shake your shoulders up and down and bounce on top of your toes for 5-10 seconds in between meetings. That's just a great release of energy that you can do in between meetings. You can do it in your office, in your cube, go into the bathroom and breathe, breathe, breathe.
Yeah. Can you just say a little bit more about Qigong and what that is? Because I'm not that familiar with it. And I have a feeling, maybe other folks are not. Just a little bit about what that practice is and what you've learned from it.
So Qigong is kind of like the grandfather of Tai Chi. So it's slow, simple, meditative moves that are on repeat. And I consider it kind of a moving meditation. So for those people who find, sitting on the floor cross-legged for 10 minutes trying to meditate impossible, Qigong is something that they might want to look at and try out because it connects you back with your body. It energizes you in the sense of what I just showed you, the shaking. It starts releasing it. And then it moves into activating your energy. So you might do repetitive movements to activate your energy. And then you go into a flow state. And it's a simple repetitive movement that's done very slowly in connection with your breath. And I find that when I do it, there is a complete shift in my energy from where I might have been, stress, the headaches, whatever I'm holding on to just releasing it. Now, for a lot of people, it can also feel like this feels like nothing is happening, because you're doing slow movement. And that's because your brain, like when you're heavy in your head energy, doesn't want to turn off. Again, it's addicted to that. I need to be in charge. And the ego is here. It's going to tell you, what are we doing here? This is so dumb. It's so stupid. We're moving so slow. What is this actually doing? When you can let that go and tune into your heart energy or your body energy and let this energy take a little bit of break, you have a much easier and better time connecting with your body and all the signs that it's trying to tell you.
As you were talking about the slow movements, I noticed myself starting to feel anxious.
Yeah, I totally get it. Lots of people do. And tell me more about that. Tell me what you were feeling.
I was picturing myself in those slow, repetitive movements, whatever that might be. And I was thinking, I thought exactly what you said, which was, what am I doing? What's happening? Even though I intellectually am very clear of the benefits of what Qigong would offer. I am a practitioner of yoga. I know that sometimes just holding a pose is so much more effective than moving around and fidgeting in it. So I get all of that, right? And I've seen the benefits of it in my body and in my students because I teach yoga as well. But just thinking about me moving slowly, I was like, oh, I got to do something.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is an addictive quality to be in movement, to be in motion, whether that's intellectual motion or physical motion, to be constantly in something.
Well, I think between that and my breath work, what has really come out for me is a very strong presence. I am able to stay in the moment and deeply connect with people because this isn't running the show.
This being your mind.
This being my mind, right? I have much more heart connection and I can be with people. And that, I think, as a leader, is just one of the most fantastic qualities that you could have. It's not so much what you can do, but who can you be as a leader?
Yeah. Another truth bomb right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing and being. I do want to talk a little bit about that for a second.
Yeah. Tell me what you think about that.
Yeah. Well, I agree. It is something that I try to bring my attention and intention to for myself when I am trying to do things, right? Because, I have my business like you do, and I'm in constant doing because you got to take action in order for things to happen. But also something I've been really thinking about over the last couple of years. And because I worked with a coach, his name's Robert Ellis, and he talked about doing and thinking and being and sort of these three, he called it triple loop learning, but we have what we do, we have how we think about things, and then we have who we be. And I bring that into coaching, I bring that into training, and I try to bring that to myself. Like, who do I want to be? Who can I be in this moment? Who am I naturally without performing, without trying so hard? Who can I be? Who I be, I think, is where my power really lies. I know I'm a great doer. Doing is not the hard part for me. It is not the hard part. It is in who I'm being and getting reconnected to who I naturally am without all the performance and the expectation of how people see me and how I have learned to identify myself, which is the high performer, hyper doer. I once got called a machine. I've been called a machine more than once because of how much I can produce. And to me, I'm like, yeah, that's easy. That's the easy part. The doing is the easy part. It's the being without all the fidgeting, right? Without all the adjustments and fidgeting. When I teach yoga and I get people into a pose and I intentionally see the class as fidgety, I will hold them and I'm like, you don't need to adjust your ponytail right now. Warrior two's fine. Right? Because I understand what it's like to try and fidget to get out of being present. So when you talk about your presence, and I can attest to your presence, I have known it since I met you, which was a few years ago. And I will be super candid with you, Deanna. Your presence sometimes is a little unnerving because of how present you are. And I love it. Like, I'll take it. But I have experienced that where I'm like, oh, she is so, like, I feel like you're seeing through me sometimes. That is powerful. That's just who you be.
Well, can I tell you, I think at the essence, I think that's who we all are. I mean, in the sense of, and I live in Southern California, so I'm going to go a little woo-woo here. But I think we are deeply loving beings who have been wounded from the moment of birth. And so to be able to return to that, to come back to that, that is the work. And I'm telling you, this world is not set up for that.
Yeah, which I think is why it makes it so hard for us to slow ourselves down, because we just don't live in a place that supports that. We don't have environments that support and encourage that. No one supports and encourages at work your self-awareness, your being, God, she's getting a bonus because she's so present.
Yeah.
Right?
But here's what I think with leadership specifically, you are asked to get things done through your team. And what your team really needs is to be seen and to be heard and to be valued. And that comes through your presence as a leader. And, for you to be able to give feedback from the heart that says, I don't want to tear you down. I'm really telling you this because I want to help you. I see there's possibility here. And it may never come across as you're getting a promotion or because, you're present, but it is in everything beyond the presence that I think is the payoff, right? Just on the other side, being fully present with someone.
Okay, I want to shift gears a little bit and I want to talk a little bit about the breath work that you've done, because I think that is, I know people probably want to hear, well, how do I start to connect with my body a little bit more? And what does that actually mean for me? And we've thrown out meditation. I've said yoga. You've said Qigong. There's many, even shaking your body to work the energy out for a few seconds. There's many ways to connect physically with ourselves. But you've done a lot of work in breath work. Can you talk a little bit about that, what that actually means, and the experience of it and what you have gotten from it?
Whew. Well, I feel like it is truly a transformative experience. The breath work that I was trained in, neurodynamic, believes that we all have an innate guiding intelligence. And just like we were talking about earlier, our bodies want to heal, so do our psyches, right? We don't want to be in psychic pain. You prick your finger with a knife and you don't have to think about or talk to a person about, I'd really like to heal this blood that's coming out. Let's talk about this. Your body just naturally does it. And so in the breath work that I have done, I have truly had some transformative and healing experiences that probably would have taken me years of talk therapy. And part of it is trusting on the mat as we're breathing. And in the breath work that I've done and the multimodalities I've done, it is a circular breath. So it's, you're inhaling and you're outhailing without any pauses at the top or the bottom of the breath. And it's through your mouth, it's open mouth breathing, and it's a little bit faster and a little bit deeper than you would normally. And it's set to music that's evocative, has some kind of emotional component to it. So there's all these senses that are going on. And then you trust the process while you're in that. And I've had, I don't know what, like spiritual experiences. I've had items from my past come up that clearly haven't been processed. I had emotional wounds with my mom for my entire life. And I would say back 2 years ago, or almost 3 now, I had what I felt was a deeply transformative experience on the mat where my relationship with my mom came up, and there were deep healing in that process. There was a lot of screaming going on, a lot of what we call toning and purging. But after it, I felt settled. And then to find out when my mom got cancer this last year, or her body created cancer, I was a different person. There had been years and years of resentment built up. And it felt like in one breathwork session, that energy had been released and transformed so that when I could show up for her, I could show up so present. And not to say that resentments didn't pop up over the months that I stayed with her. They certainly did, but I could catch them. That's part of the deal is, can I catch the thoughts that I am experiencing? And sometimes what we can do first is recognize, oh, how am I feeling in my body? I'm feeling twisted up. I can feel my shoulders hunch up. Oh, what is the thought that is feeding that? Oh, I have resentments about my mom, thinking she would never do everything that I'm doing for her. She couldn't do it. And being able to say that and look at that and go, yeah, that may be right. It doesn't have anything to do with me showing up right here. How do I show up for her? Right. So it's all these things. They often say that, a good breathwork session, much like a psychedelic session, can be incredibly healing in a matter of an hour or two versus, years of talk therapy. Not that talk therapy, I don't want to,
Therapy's great.
Yeah, therapy's great, everybody. Therapy's great. It's great to be able to talk about your things for sure. And there's also other modalities if talk therapy hasn't served you, right? There's lots of things that can be helped. And, what happens in our brain with psychedelics and what happens with breath work, which is all natural, can be somewhat similar in the effect that you're oxygenating your brain. You're going into what they call a holotropic breath, right? So it is really oxygenated, you're feeling something, and then it goes into an integrative state where you're not breathing like that. And that's when it just feels calming and soothing and relaxing. There are so many studied benefits around breath work about what it does for your physicality, putting you into that rest and digest system, that parasympathetic nervous system, what it does for your emotions, right? So that you aren't being pulled by your emotions everywhere you go, right? And what it does for your mental resiliency, your ability to be present with people.
Yeah, wow, you just said so many things. Breathing is hard for me, which sounds silly to say because my body automatically does it, right? Which I think is why I am pulled toward yoga, because breathing is a part of yoga, and we have different, they call them pranayamas, which is the breath, different breath work that you can do. And there are different ways that you can breathe: through your nose, through your mouth, using your tongue to create energy and heat in the body, cool the body, all the things. And I'm fascinated by that, but I get to move while I'm doing it, which for me, you said moving meditation earlier with Qigong. Yoga feels that way for me. That's my preferred way to get connected with my physical body and get into my breathing. And what I love about that, and what it sounds like is happening in your breath work, is the intentional act of breathing, not just letting the body take over, but bringing attention to it and then intentionally using it, leveraging it, cultivating it, moving it through your physical body to create change.
Yeah. And let me talk to that for just a minute, because what can happen for us, and especially when we're under a lot of stress, is our, no, what am I losing it? The solar plexus. Thank you. The solar plexus, sits right underneath our lungs, and it's like a plate. It's not just a thin muscle that sits in it covers from the front to the sides to the back, and there's a hole for your veins and arteries to go through to your heart, and it's shaped a little bit like a mushroom, like this. And what can happen for people is that when we don't practice a deeper breath, that can get locked up. So this mushroom which can make it really hard for people to breathe, right? And when we can't breathe fully, what is that a signal about, right? You talked about when we're under stress, we're usually doing very shallow breathing, like, right? So that signal then tells our brain, oh, we're in fight or flight. We got to do something here. So the act of actually pushing down our lungs on that solar plexus so that moves down is a signal to our brain, oh, we're safe. We can take a deep breath. But for a lot of people, because they've been in that state for so long, pushing down on that feels really difficult because they haven't practiced it ever. So I'm not saying that that's your case. I know you like to move and be doing, but when people say, I can't breathe, and you'll often hear people say, breathe into your belly, which we don't have lungs in our belly, so that feels impossible to do. But what we're really asking is to expand our lungs so fully that solar plexus gets pushed down, right? And for some people, like my mom, I tried to do it with her. She's been in fight or flight her whole life, I think. And she found it really hard to be able to do that. So you can simply start practicing here while you're listening to see, envision, can I fill my lungs so fully that there might be some movement in that solar plexus and get that pushed down.
Yeah, I love how you describe it. You're making it very easy to understand. Okay. Well, I think this is probably a good place for us to pause. But before we finish, I want to just ask you, is there any parting words that you'd like to share, either about the somatic awareness, the breath work, the Qigong, anything that you feel like if they were to take away one thing from this episode that you'd want them to walk away with, what's the last thing you'd want to share with the listeners about this?
That your body has wisdom and it's talking to you and you may not be listening. But if you can catch yourself at any moment and just simply ask yourself, what do you need? What do you need right now? And in that pause, and your ego might come up and say, oh, I need Johnny to knock this, stuff off. And but it's not about anybody else in this question. It is really about yourself. And you may get a simple answer like, oh, I need more water. Or, oh, I need to take a walk. Oh, I need rest. But your body will respond if you start getting curious with it. So simply starting the dialogue, because it's been talking to you all the time, but you have not picked up the phone. So just pick up the phone and start getting curious and asking yourself, what do you need in this moment?
Wonderful. Pick up the phone and get curious. What do you need at this moment? Awesome. Deanna, thank you so very much for sharing all of this, for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, and your experiences with us on this. Thanks to everybody for listening. And we will be back in another 2 weeks with another episode. Until then, take good care of yourselves, lots of love and big energy. Bye for now.
Bye.